Good morning. X Winterview is back again. Yes, he is, with another brief dialogue with his dear friend, Annastacey. The subject of this brief dialogue is Dark Night of the Soul. Yes, thought I'd take a little look at this spiritual idea, you could say, spiritual concept about the well, it's an idea that in some ways you've lost your divinity. You're a long way from the glorious spiritual goal that you had set out to find. So far, in fact, that you feel lost and confused. You don't know which way to turn. You are sure that after 30 years of meditating, eating wonderful vegetarian food, of being really, really, really nice, that you surely deserve a reward in some ways. Or, moreover, that you are having this dark night of the soul experience, but sneakily have told yourself that it's okay, because I've heard that the dark night of the soul experience precedes some kind of spiritual reward, perhaps even enlightenment itself. So I've intellectualized the dark night of the soul experience to explain away the discomfort. What I'm hoping for ultimately is when the clouds of the dark night of the soul are gone, when I somehow resolve my dark night of my soul, that I will be enlightened. So let's have a little looky-poo at this one. This well-trodden concept. It seems to harken back to some of the more classic spiritual or religious texts that seem to be still in vogue, you could say. Most notably, I think, is the Bible, or the biblical accounts of the life of Jesus in particular, where it was suggested that Jesus, on his cross, nailed there, probably in a lot of pain, was known to say something along the lines of, "Father, why have you forsaken me?" Or more in biblical language, with thous and arts and why hasts and all that, somehow, because that's the way they spoke in the Bible, apparently, if they spoke English, which they didn't. Anyway, that's another topic. But the idea in general is that just before the great revelation, the big lollipop, you might say, there is a collapse of everything. It's in some ways hearkening to the previous dialogue on self-image. This one is more along the lines of beliefs, though, than image itself, perhaps, although they are entwined and entangled. What is exactly at the core of this pain is it comes back to the very fundamental structure of the mind, the cause and effect structure. The mind only sees time-space in cause and effect. And here's the kicker. In case you really didn't get this before, it's not that the mind sees time and space out there in the world. The world that the mind sees is the mind. How about that one? Try that on for size. The mind sees itself in some ways. That's a poor way of putting it. But it's a model. It sees time and space itself because it is itself time and space. I don't know how better to put that. The world is the mind. How about that? The world of time and space is the mind. That's maybe a bit better. So, within the time-space world of mind, it appears that there is distance, a here and a there, a horizon somewhere in the distance, the sky above, the ground below, and all that. It takes time to get from here to there. Anytime there's an object the space between the object represents some duration. If there's movement, there's time, and so on and so forth. This is all how it appears, and it seems that that's just the world. That's how the world is. And we have this wonderful cultural idea that we are looking out these two eyeball windows, we might say, onto the world, and the brain is just reporting the world as it is. This is not a very good model, let's just say. I don't want to say it's false, because that it somehow bashes the appearance in a way, makes it wrong. It's one model. Another way to look at it is that the entire experience is mind, or made of mind stuff. It has been referred to in some spiritual texts or spiritual discourses as consciousness. Everything is consciousness. I don't like that definition, because the word conscious or consciousness has several varying meanings in Western culture, at least. It's not a great word. I think it's confusing. I'm not a big fan of all the models that I use and explain, but hey, that's what I got to work with. So this world that the mind sees and the mind is time and space. It's an appearance, you could say. Does that mean it's false? It's a funny question. In some ways it does. It means that it's totally fake. But the other side of it is that that's what it appears like. That's how it appears. And so in some ways it's real as well. There's a reality to that. If that's how it appears, then why can't we say it's real? Even if we have, let's exaggerate the example. Let's suppose we have very primitive understandings of the world. Let's go back to pixies, goblins, and demons, in fact. Why cannot they be real as well, you could say? Let's suppose that the theory of mental health is due to demons. A person has a demon inside them. The model in some ways works quite well, because you can explain that before the person had the demon they were normal. The person then did something wrong to elicit or to bring into themselves a demon. The demon, being not very nice, made them tormented and gave them unpleasant experiences such as delusions or mania or depression, anxiety, blah blah blah. And the goal therefore is to help that person get rid of their demon or demons. And when they do, they feel better. And the model actually, it works okay. Of course it's hard to take it scientifically because of it's hard to define the demon. You can't measure the demon, and with the measuring instruments of the day we probably can't find a demon. And so in that way we could say that the model isn't very scientific, but we couldn't say that the model is false or fake. So is it real? Is the model real? Well, if it appears that way, it appears real. The whole thing with real is that's the best we can ever do. The best we can ever say is that it appears real. We can't say it is real. We have no ultimate benchmark, something solid. We cannot touch something solid, then look back at the world and go, relative to the solid thing, that's real. Because the experience of solidity is an experience, and it's impermanent, an impermanent experience. So we naturally, not wanting to pretend there's no reality, we just go along with the model as real. I feel like I've gone on a tangent. I had a point here. I think I remember now. Okay, so this is the way that the world appears, this sort of space-time realm, and science is improving models of understanding. It thinks it's getting to the core of reality, but that's a whole philosophical debate right there in itself. But we could say that the models are becoming more sophisticated, and the experience of predictability is perhaps increasing, but that certainly doesn't say anything about reality, just another experience. And within this whole play, we find the seeker. This person. This world is dissatisfying in many ways. The reason for its dissatisfaction is because the models are not taken as models, they're taken as reality. When the models are taken as real, when our beliefs are taken as real, when we indeed are taken as real, it's incredibly dissatisfying in the long run. It's a struggle. It's vulnerable, it's awful, in fact. And we do our best to try and make it nice, but it's an effort, it's an ongoing challenge. And so this thing called spirituality appears. That this is the ultimate, that I will transcend the world. Because I now know that these models are arbitrary, I now know that there's no reality, I now know that there's no person, that what I have to do is transcend it all somehow. That's what I'll do. Not realizing, I guess you could say, that it's still a personal endeavor, it's still occurring in the space-time realm. The seeker who discovers spirituality, who sees the limitation of the temporal, real, tangible, material world, who sees that, very, very rightly so, suggests to itself, I've got to get out of this somehow, which becomes the spiritual search, as opposed to, we might say, the material search. We know that the material search doesn't really work very well. It works for a few people who are insanely rich, but for the rest of us it's a bit of a hard slog. So we turn to spirituality. We fail to realize, I suppose, because it seems that we're doing it, it still seems that fundamentally I, in the middle, am doing the spiritual search, that it is just another form of materiality. It's still very firmly in the space-time realm. And so the endeavor to be spiritual, to do spirituality, is as equally dissatisfying, ultimately, as the material search. But it takes a hell of a lot longer to realize that, because the beliefs around spirituality are so powerful. The rewards are given presented in such a way that they're inevitable. If you are very nice and noble and holy and pure, you will definitely be rewarded. Definitely. This is a wonderful con, you could say. You might balk at my use of the word con, but it is a con. There is no lollipop for being spiritual. And so we end up with dark night of the soul. The dark night of the soul is the inability to recognize the con, the refusal to accept the con that has been the wool that has been pulled over the eyes of the naive, so-called naive, spiritual seeker. That is the pain right there. I cannot accept that this spiritual journey that I have been on for all these years, the cleansing, the purification, the manipulating of my energies, the stance that I've taken with respect to the honoring of all sentient beings, and so on and so forth, has been for nothing. The problem is that enlightenment falls outside of the material space-time realm. It has no overlap into that realm. It's not a reward based on endeavor made in that realm. It feels like it is, though. It feels like, because the mind is used to endeavor and doing stuff to get stuff, it feels like it naturally should come as a reward. When I figure out all my self-images and my beliefs and transcend them and surrender them and so forth, be vulnerable to the inner pain, blah blah blah, that I will get enlightened. So here is the awful truth, you could say. You can't get enlightened. you won't be enlightened. There's no reward for the person. There's no reward for the seeker. The seeker will get nothing but pain and misery and discomfort and regret and feelings of self-loathing and so on and so forth, layered on, heaped on into one giant, awful, dark night of the soul. And so that's what the dark night of the soul is, more or less. It's the net result of being sold a lie in the spiritual search. The ideas and ideals held about the spiritual search have finally collapsed. And there's a grieving. That's the pain right there, a grieving or a wondering, what happened? Why did it all go so awfully wrong for me? So we come back to this starting point again. It forces us in a way back, or it forces the mind back to the starting point. What did I presume was my model of life in the world that set me upon this apparent journey? What did I presume? I must have presumed that I, this person, was limited and sought freedom from this limitation. Naturally, of course I'm going to do something about it. But the starting point, right from the word I, was flawed. A false starting point. The person who you asked directions on that spiritual path, metaphorically speaking, pointed you in totally the wrong direction, you could say, as a little narrative metaphor thing. There is no person. There is no center. There is no one who is limited. The idea of the person is the limitation, is the awfulness. The idea of the person is a natural, you could say, response or consequence of the mind's dual linear perception. If there's a space-time world with distance and things and stuff and everything, there must be a me in it. There must be an I. It's a natural consequence of mentalization, let's say. That's what it is. But it is not the truth. It's not reality. It's an appearance. It's how it appears. No one is doing that. No one does the mind. The mind is just the doing, the appearance of thinking, so to speak, or conceptualizing, etc. It's all, in some ways, overlapping and interlocking energy fields, if you're more into the whole energy thing, that no one does. Anyway, I think that more or less covers the dark night of the soul. I love that expression, by the way. And time to give the old voice box a rest and get on with the drive. Thanks for listening. Comments are welcome.